Watch a cat eat sometime. Not the polite bowl of dry kibble, the other kind. A cat that's caught a mouse, or been given raw chicken, or found something questionable in the back of the fridge that's been sitting out far longer than it should have. It eats it. No hesitation, no caution, and almost never any consequence. Meanwhile, if you or I ate meat that had been left unrefrigerated for even a few hours, we could be looking at violent food poisoning within a day, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, sometimes hospitalization. So what's actually going on here? Why does an animal that regularly eats raw meat crawling with the exact same bacteria that would put a human in the emergency room, walk away completely fine almost every single time? This is the story of feline biology, an internal chemistry so specifically adapted to eating dangerous foods safely that it makes the human digestive system look almost fragile by comparison. And understanding why reveals something surprising about what actually makes food dangerous in the first place, and why that danger has almost nothing to do with the food itself, and almost everything to do with what's waiting for it once it's swallowed. But to understand why cats can eat what would hospitalize a person, you first need to understand what food poisoning actually is, because most people think of it as something the food does to you. It isn't. Food poisoning is what happens when your body loses a specific battle, a battle against bacteria that has already been fought and decided long before the food ever reaches your stomach. When you eat food contaminated with bacteria like Salmonella, E. coli, or Campylobacter, the outcome of that meal depends almost entirely on one thing: whether your stomach acid is strong enough and present in sufficient volume to kill those bacteria before they survive long enough to reach your intestines and multiply. In humans, stomach acid, hydrochloric acid, typically sits at a pH somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5, depending on how recently you've eaten, your individual physiology, and even the time of day. That's already quite acidic. Acidic enough to destroy a meaningful percentage of harmful bacteria in most situations. But it isn't always enough, and this is exactly where the danger creeps in. Now compare that to a cat. Feline stomach acid regularly measures around pH 1 to 2, and in many studies, sits reliably closer to the more acidic end of that range than human stomach acid typically does. That might not sound like a dramatic difference on paper, a single point or two on the pH scale, but the pH scale is logarithmic, not linear. Each single point drop represents a 10-fold increase in acidity. A stomach at pH 1 isn't twice as acidic as one at pH 2. It's 10 times more acidic. And a cat's stomach, sitting consistently at that lower, more extreme end, is annihilating bacterial populations at a scale that a human stomach, even a healthy one, simply isn't built to match on a routine basis. This is not an accident of evolution. It's the direct result of millions of years of cats being obligate carnivores, meaning their entire digestive system evolved around one specific job: breaking down raw animal tissue, bone, and everything that comes along with it, efficiently and safely, without the luxury of cooking anything first. Humans are omnivores. Our digestive systems evolved to handle an enormously varied diet: plants, grains, cooked meat, fermented foods, and critically, humans have had cooking as a tool for roughly 2 million years, a technology that effectively outsourced a significant portion of pathogen destruction to fire, long before it ever reached our stomachs. Cats never had that luxury, and never needed it, because their internal chemistry evolved to do the job cooking does for us, just chemically instead of thermally. But stomach acid is only the first layer of defense, and it's not the only reason cats handle contaminated foods so differently than humans do. The second major factor is something almost nobody considers: the length and speed of the digestive tract itself. A human digestive tract, from mouth to the other end, measures roughly 9 meters, about 30 feet, and food can take anywhere from 24 to 72 hours to complete that journey. That's a long transit time, and a long transit time matters enormously when bacteria are involved, because it gives any bacteria that survive the stomach acid a substantial window of opportunity to multiply, colonize the intestinal lining, and produce the toxins that actually cause the symptoms we associate with food poisoning: the cramping, the diarrhea, the vomiting. A cat's digestive tract, by contrast, is dramatically shorter relative to body size, and transit time is significantly faster, often complete within somewhere around 10 to 24 hours, depending on the individual animal and the meal. This isn't just a minor anatomical footnote. It's a critical piece of the puzzle, because it means that even in the rare event that some bacteria survive the initial acid bath in a cat's stomach, they have dramatically less time to establish themselves and multiply before they're already moving out of the body entirely. Speed itself becomes a defense mechanism. There's a third factor too, one that operates at a level most people never think about: the composition of a cat's gut microbiome itself. Cats evolved eating a diet almost entirely of animal protein and fat, and their resident gut bacteria, the trillions of microorganisms that naturally live inside every cat's intestines, are specifically adapted to that environment. Research comparing feline and human gut microbiomes has found that cats host bacterial populations particularly well suited to competing against and crowding out opportunistic pathogens introduced through raw meat, essentially occupying the ecological niche that dangerous bacteria would otherwise exploit. It's less like a single powerful defense and more like a resident population that's already claimed the territory, leaving invading bacteria very little room to establish a foothold. Now, here's where this gets genuinely important, because none of this means cats are entirely immune. And the exceptions to this rule reveal just as much about the mechanism as the rule itself does. Kittens, elderly cats, and cats with any underlying illness that compromises their immune system or reduces stomach acid production lose a meaningful portion of this protection. Veterinary studies have documented cases of feline salmonellosis and other bacterial infections, and they cluster overwhelmingly in exactly these vulnerable populations, animals whose defenses were already weakened before the contaminated food ever entered the picture. This mirrors almost exactly the pattern we see in humans, where the very young, the very old, and the immunocompromised are disproportionately represented in severe food poisoning cases. Because the underlying defense mechanism, whatever form it takes, simply isn't operating at full strength. There's also a critical distinction between a cat carrying dangerous bacteria and a cat becoming sick from it. This is a detail that veterinarians and public health researchers pay close attention to, because it's actually one of the more concerning aspects of this entire story. Studies have found that a meaningful percentage of healthy cats fed raw diets test positive for Salmonella in their stool, shedding the bacteria without showing any clinical symptoms themselves. Their digestive system handled the exposure well enough to avoid illness, but the bacteria can still pass through and exist in their waste, which creates a real transmission risk to humans in the household, particularly children, elderly family members, or anyone with a compromised immune system, through litter box contact or environmental contamination. In other words, the cat's remarkable resistance to food poisoning doesn't necessarily mean the food was ever made safe. It means the cat's body won that particular battle. The bacteria can still exist afterward and pose a genuine risk to the humans living alongside that cat. This is exactly why veterinary and public health organizations have raised specific concerns about the growing popularity of raw food diets for pets. It's not that cats can't handle raw meat. Biologically, in most healthy adult cats, they clearly can, remarkably well. It's that raw meat handling introduces bacterial contamination into a household environment, on countertops, on hands, in food bowls, in litter, regardless of whether the cat itself gets sick from it, and humans handling that same raw meat, or cleaning up after a cat that's carrying it asymptomatically, don't get the benefit of that same extreme stomach acid and rapid transit time protecting them. It's worth comparing this to other carnivorous animals as well, because the pattern isn't unique to cats. It's a broader signature of what obligate carnivory does to a digestive system over evolutionary time. Vultures, for instance, are famous for consuming carrion in advanced states of decay, meat teeming with bacteria that would be lethal to almost any other animal, and research into vulture stomach acid has found it to be extraordinarily corrosive, among the most acidic of any vertebrate studied, specifically because their entire ecological role depends on safely processing food that nothing else can. Wild wolves and big cats in the wild show similar, though less extreme, adaptations compared to domestic dogs, whose digestive systems have shifted somewhat over thousands of years of living alongside humans and eating a more varied, often cooked diet. The underlying principle holds across species. The more consistently an animal's evolutionary diet involved raw, potentially contaminated meat, the more extreme its internal defenses tend to be, because natural selection ruthlessly favors whichever individuals survive exposure that would otherwise be fatal. This also helps explain why domestic cats, despite thousands of years of living alongside humans, have retained this trait almost entirely intact, while dogs, their fellow domesticated carnivore, show somewhat more variability. Cats remained obligate carnivores throughout their entire domestication history, never shifting toward the more omnivorous diet dogs gradually adapted to, which means the evolutionary pressure maintaining that extreme stomach acidity and rapid gut transit never let up, generation after generation, right up to the cat sitting on your couch today. So why doesn't this story get told the way we talk about human food safety? Because it runs almost entirely counter to instinct. We watch a cat eat something that would horrify us, and assume either the cat got lucky, or that animals in general are simply immune to things that harm humans, when the real explanation is a precise, evolved biological system, extreme stomach acidity, rapid digestive transit, and a specialized gut microbiome, working together as a genuinely sophisticated defense mechanism, one refined over millions of years specifically for the diet cats have always eaten. It also reveals something important about food safety in general, that applies well beyond cats. Danger from bacteria was never really about the food itself. It's about the relationship between the contamination present and the specific defenses available to break it down before it causes harm. Change the defenses, weaken the immune system, reduce stomach acid, extend the transit time, and identical food becomes dramatically more dangerous. Strengthen those same defenses, and food that seems obviously hazardous becomes something a body can handle without incident. This doesn't mean humans should take any comfort from a cat's biology, or that raw meat is somehow safer than we think. Human stomach acid, human digestive transit time, and the human gut microbiome are simply built for a different evolutionary purpose, and none of the protections that make raw meat manageable for a cat translate to the human body in any meaningful way. If anything, understanding exactly how specific and finely tuned a cat's defenses are should highlight how much less protected we actually are by comparison. The next time you watch your cat eat something that makes you wince, remember what's actually happening beneath the surface, an internal chemistry sitting at an acidity 10 times stronger than your own stomach, a digestive tract built for speed rather than thorough processing, and a resident population of bacteria standing guard against exactly the kind of invader that would put you in a hospital bed. It isn't luck. It isn't indifference to danger. It's one of the most specialized digestive systems in the animal kingdom, quietly doing its job every single time that bowl gets filled.